Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I'm driving home from the theater. And we've got an interesting one here today. Every so often, one of these films comes along that even after taking some time to absorb it, ponder it, consider it from various angles, I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about it. That happens every so often. You get one of these, and in a way, that tends to work more in their favor, because I do like movies that make me think. I do like ones that make the old gears crank, and you have to ask that question, what would I do if I was that person in that situation? The old Stanislavski magic if, but from a film critic perspective as opposed to an actor's. And this movie definitely did that. I'm not sure, just at the end of the day, as a complete product, how I feel about it. So we're going to talk about this and try to piece together what my general opinion is. However, before we get to that, there are a couple things I have to say. So if you know of this movie, if you've seen trailers or anything for this movie, you know that it's purposefully vague. The information that is out there about what's going on in this movie is, for once, they don't give away the game in the trailer. So, if you know this movie, you know it is about Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. They're a young couple. They're a week away from getting married. And then one night at a dinner with friends, they play a game, what's the worst thing you ever did? And everyone kind of shares it. And then Zendaya shares hers. And whatever it is rocks the foundation of this, not just this relationship, but every relationship she has to its absolute core. It's so disturbing, so crazy that everybody is just like, what? And it fucks up everything. So I bring this up because that is the basis of the movie, and clearly, to talk about this film as a whole, to talk about it thematically and from a filmmaking perspective, I'm gonna have to talk about what that big secret is. And I can almost guarantee you it's not something you see coming. Like, I was completely blindsided by it. So before we get into this, I have to put up the classic spoiler warning.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
But more than that, I feel like I also have to do something I really don't do that often, but I do think it's necessary for this discussion. I am going to have to put up the trigger warning. This is going to talk about some uncomfortable things. It's going to address some uncomfortable topics. Very uncomfortable. And again, not one that you would automatically jump to. So you need to be aware as I go into this discussion that this is going to involve discussions and contemplation on certain acts that maybe you haven't given much thought to, or you kind of have your opinion of, and that's it. And those are perfectly valid. I know I come into it with my own experience and my own beliefs, which I'll cover in a little bit. And there are certain things about this movie that made me very uncomfortable. That's what it's trying to do. It is trying to make you uncomfortable. So be aware of that. It's pretty big, in my opinion, and it leads to disturbing and difficult thought processes and exercises for everyone involved. So please be aware of that as we move forward. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to spoil the movie now. So during this dinner, the secret that Zendaya comes out with is that when she was a teenager, about 15 years old or so, she planned, practiced, and was about to carry out a school shooting. Yeah, just saying it is like, you know what's so crazy? And I didn't think about this until watching this movie. About halfway through it, this kind of dawned on me, is that, seeing the trailer, I think everybody kind of filled in the blanks with what they thought she had done. She had stolen money. She had killed someone. Maybe she had been assaulted. Or, she had perpetrated an assault. So your mind was kind of ready for stuff like, because those are topics that a lot of film and television and books, they cover it. The pop culture is very, very on it when it comes to dealing with those types of things. But there are not a lot, and I think for good reason, let me stress this, there are not a lot of movies, TV shows, or whatnot about mass shootings from the mass shooters or the potential mass shooters' point of view that actually comes at it from a sympathetic place. And if you feel uncomfortable listening to that sentence, first of all, I guarantee you not as uncomfortable as I feel saying it. But the other thing is, that is exactly what the movie is going for. It is trying to come up with the thing that, for both the audience and the people in attendance, her fiance, their best friends, something that is going to completely rock the foundation of everything they thought they knew, and be the thing that could not just destroy the marriage, but completely destroy all of their lives. So it's supposed to be uncomfortable, and it's supposed to be distasteful. If you're responding that way, good. In my opinion, that's how I think you should respond to something like that. So once this bomb is dropped, that's probably not the best terminology, so I apologize. Once this secret is out there, the rest of the movie goes on two paths. One, we see from Zendaya's perspective, and this is something that again, I hate saying it like this, but this is something the movie does well, and we'll talk about that in a second. For her, from her perspective, this was an issue she had when she was a kid. She didn't go through with it. Life got better, and she moved past it, but it's this dark thing of what she might have done and what she could have, brought that's haunted her, that she's kept secret for so long, because the revelation of it distorts the way people see her. So you have her, trying to cope with that and trying to now explain herself years after the fact. And then you have Robert Pattinson's point of view, where now everything he thought he knew about this person is suddenly seen in a different light. Seeing that, one day walking across the street, a car nearly hit them at the crosswalk, and she went off and was cursing at the guy. Now he's starting to think, wow, was that a sign of, these deep anger issues? He has a coffee mug it's his coffee mug, but it says, "Give me the coffee or I'll shoot," and it has a gun on it. And now he can't look at that. And he seems to see gun imagery everywhere. And he can't help but imprint her face onto it. So for him, it is now trying to incorporate this new information into the person he thought he knew, which he really does because he knows that person. But now this new information about their past puts everything else in a new context. And it's about that balance. So yeah, it's kind of a crazy film, but honestly, I don't think we should expect anything less from A24. That's what they do. It's what they specialize in. So let's talk about what this movie does well. Let's start with the performances. The acting in this is top-notch. This is really good from everyone involved. And you have to give the special points to Zendaya and Robert Pattinson, of course, because they're the ones carrying this. Zendaya is on track to have one of the most unique and interesting filmographies of any young actor working today. She definitely seems to dip her toes in a lot of kind of darker material and plays it from a lot of different perspectives. Now, I have to say that despite Zendaya being very prevalent in modern day films, I actually haven't seen her in that much. I know her, of course, from the Marvel Spider-Man films. I've never seen Euphoria. I saw the first Dune, in which she kind of is more of a cameo player. Never saw the second one. I didn't see that tennis sex movie that she was in. So, you know, for me, this is almost a new introduction to her, and she does it really well. She plays it, and there's a lot of emotion to play in this, and you feel her in every frame. She's very good. And I think we also have to give up for Robert Pattinson, who has been fighting since the early 2000s to escape from the shadow of Edward Cullen. You know, that role he's always going to be tied to come hell or high water, but he has worked very hard, just like Kristen Stewart has, to say, that's not who I am, I'm better than that. And he is. He's very good here. And what I really enjoy about his portrayal is going back to that initial scene that you're going to talk about here in a second. When they ask him, you know, what's the worst thing he ever did? You know, he really can't come up with anything. The most he can say is that he cyberbullied someone when he was 14. He didn't really give details. So throughout the movie, you're kind of thinking, okay, the other shoe's going to drop. It's going to turn out he did something way worse. It's going to turn out, some kind of Shyamalanian twist.
Oh, what a twist.
But the movie doesn't do that. Like, what it turns out and what his character's journey is that he ends up becoming the worst version of himself and doing the worst things that he's ever done in his attempt to process this new information. It's really quite fascinating, and just what he does, and you can see it as an audience member, and you're like, you know that the choices he's making in any given scene are wrong. Like, at one point he's trying to re-explain to their best friends kind of what they talked about after, and he starts kind of twisting the truth and restructuring the narrative of the information she gave him to make her sound more sympathetic. Later, he kind of just breaks down in front of a coworker, and then just overcome with the emotion, he kisses her, and then they almost have sex right there in the office, and he stops it. So he does some pretty horrendous things. This is after talking to that same coworker in a hypothetical, quote unquote, where he basically tells her Zendaya's secret without giving names, but any idiot can put one and one together in this instance. And you can see him, and it's like being outside of the body. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but I know I have, of you're in a situation and you know the choice that you're making is wrong, or that this is not the smart thing to do, but when you feel like you're cornered, you have to say something, and you do, and there's this voice screaming at you in the back of your head, no, stupid, no, not that. And then, again, I know I've had that situation. I don't know if anybody else has. But you definitely feel that as an audience member. You can feel that in his performance, that he knows with each step what he's doing is not a smart thing, but it's like he doesn't feel like he has any other choice, and he has to do something, which he doesn't. He doesn't have to do anything. But so yeah, the acting is really, really good in this. I'd say the writing is also really good. Especially, I have to give special props to that crucial scene, that inciting incident scene at that dinner with their friends, because you have to feel the connection between those characters, and you have to feel the happiness and the joy and the real camaraderie, so that when that new truth is revealed and the aftershocks are felt, that it affects you as an audience. You have to feel for them. And that scene is so good. All of the actors are just, it really feels casual and relaxed. It feels like a real conversation. The dialogue is so good, and all of them are just connecting so well. It would not surprise me if we were to find out that during that scene they allowed the actors to kind of ad-lib a little bit in terms of their reactions, to get them a little bit more natural, because it really does feel like you're watching a conversation. And then when that new truth hits, it's amazing how the ripple effect is felt through the movie. It's like watching a tsunami begin. You know, at first it just starts at, I shouldn't use tsunami, I'm more attuned to earthquakes. For anyone who's ever been in a big earthquake, which I have been, it starts off as this low kind of rumble, and you're not 100% sure, hey, is the earth moving? You know? And then it is moving, and you're like, okay, this is an earthquake, okay. And then it keeps going, and you're like, all right, this is still happening. Oh shit, and so on, right? And that's kind of what this is like. You throw that one pebble into the river or into the stream and just watch the circle spread out. And the film does an amazing job, because it starts out with that, almost like the 5 stages of grief. It starts out with the denial, where everyone's like, no, you're making this up. What? What? And then it goes into anger. Everyone's angry at her. Their one friend, what causes the fallout with their friends is that the one friend says, after she tells the story, says, my cousin is in a wheelchair because she was shot in a mass shooting. So this is someone who has a personal connection to this. So then we get into anger, and anger just starts to radiate out from everybody and coming in different shapes and forms. Then we get into bargaining, and that's the trying to make excuses and trying to cover things up and trying to pave over, and then it explodes into anger at the end, which I won't get into, and then finally a form of acceptance. And the filmmaking in this is incredibly strong, not just the writing, but what I think the writing, the acting, and the directing all come together to do, and what they do really well. And I think this is one of the reasons I have a problem nailing down exactly how I feel about this movie, is it does something that is incredibly tricky to do. And that is, it actually makes you understand all sides of this. It does not come at you, at least in my interpretation of it, it doesn't come at you with this person is right, this reaction is right, and this reaction is wrong. everybody has their reactions, and the film is very good at kind of saying all of these reactions are justified. You know, the woman whose cousin was hurt is someone who's been personally affected by this. And you understand her anger. I never once begrudged her anger or thought that she was being unreasonable in her anger. I never once thought that Robert Pattinson was being unreasonable in his responses of trying to, you know, figure this out and trying to process this. And here's the heavy lifting. This is where I want to be very careful in my phrasing. You also don't feel that Zendaya is wrong. Zendaya, I might be pronouncing her name wrong. I'm sorry. You never necessarily feel that she is wrong in her perception that this is something that clearly was of its time. It happened. They do a good job of trying to explain, one, why she was about to do this. But they also make it a point to kind of show how she grew up and how it got better and how she, you know, I don't want to say healed from it, but became a better person from it. That's not who she is. I remember very distinctly, there's this line from one of my favorite shows, House. And it's the season premiere of the second season. And he's treating a death row inmate played by LL Cool J. And in one of those scenes, LL Cool J is talking to Omar Epps. And he's talking about that, you know, LL Cool J, raised his brother and took care of him and made sure he didn't become the same person that LL Cool J was. And then LL Cool J says, what if your entire life was all about the worst thing you ever did? And that is, from that, you understand kind of where the Zendaya character is coming from. That this was the absolute worst thing she ever did. It's something that haunts her and still plagues her thoughts. We see in the film that she's a little bit distant with people. She doesn't have a lot of friends. And partially, we're led to believe that's because she doesn't feel she's worthy of them because of what she almost did. You know, and now she has happiness, and now the worst thing she ever did is coming back to haunt her, and it feels like all of the progress she made and all the things she's done since don't count because of this one bad thing. Now, let's not get it twisted. The bad thing is a really fucking bad thing. I'm going to give a little bit more of myself than I normally do in this review. And I'm going to try not to go into too many details, but let me be very clear about this. I don't get into my political beliefs very often. I think I've made it clear how I feel about certain people, or monsters, as I should say. But let me be clear about this. I detest guns. I hate guns, and I hate how gun happy this country is. It sickens me. In my personal opinion, the only thing a gun is good for is making action scenes in movies more exciting. But I would rather watch James Bond being chased down a hallway while the bad guys shoot rubber bands and spitballs at him than ever have to turn on the news and hear about another mass shooting at a school. You know? And I hate the way that when this happens, the people supposedly in power just sweep it under the rug. Just, we send thoughts and prayers, and, you know, that's it. You know, we're not actually going to do anything. You know, it's the movies, it's the video games, it's the rap music, but God forbid we do anything to harm the precious gun, right? And I can also tell you, again, getting a little personal here, I have been in a situation. I am an educator. And being an educator in this country, in this day and age, is a scary thing. We have to have lockdown drills. You know, that's something we never had when I was a kid. But more to the point, I have been in a lockdown. I have been in that situation. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, it is one of the most terrifying things. It changes you. So I bring this up to give context. To give context that this is where I stand. This movie does not change my position on that. But with all of that knowledge about me and where I stand and my personal experiences being true, this movie did something that I never thought that anything could do, and it actually did try to get me to understand what goes into the mind of the person who perpetrates it. And, that's a scary thing. It's even more scary in a film like this because you have to acknowledge that they're not inhuman monsters, that they are people. That makes it even worse, because if one person can have that set of emotional triggers, anybody could. And that's a point that they try to bring up. So I must give this movie props. It hasn't changed my position, don't get it twisted, in any way, shape, or form. But it did actually make me have to acknowledge, this person is a person, and where she was at, and they make a point of bringing up that the brain is not fully developed until you're 24. And that the adolescent brain especially is very influenced by what it sees and what it hears. And, it doesn't have the ability in some cases to make certain connections. But I also think that's a plus of the film, is that it never tries to excuse her. It never says that what she did was okay in any way, shape, or form. It's very clear that everybody, including her, is aware that it's a terrible thing. And it doesn't try to excuse her or exonerate her, but it does try to say, this is what was going through her mind. So, this is a complicated story, clearly. And you can see why I've brought up the triggers. What's also interesting, and again, I'll get a little personal here. I'm going to try to not get too much into it. But I can also say that I see things from the Zendaya point of view. I've had that happen to me as well. I had someone I was with, someone told them a lie about me. I'm not going to get into it. But told them a lie. And they then told me, it's like, well, now this recontextualizes everything I know about you. Every picture I see of you and everything you've said, now it makes me put it in this different context and wondering, So, I hate that. In my case, it was a lie. In her case, it's the truth, but I get that feeling of now, that person that you are and the good that you've done is now completely erased in people's minds. So again, a very complicated juggling act that this movie does, morally, ethically, politically. And it keeps all those balls in the air very, very well. And that's tricky. It's a tense movie, and everything from the directing to the acting and all that, it's designed to keep that tension. But it's also designed that Robert Pattinson and Zendaya's characters are so well established and acted, and they both have such great chemistry together and just very charismatic performers that you want them to be okay. You want somehow for this to be okay, but you don't know what they can do to make it okay, and that's the same thing the characters are going through. So yeah, it's a mind fuck from start to finish. And I think for the most part, this film does a lot of it well. There are some things about it that I don't like, in terms of just the narrative and the filmmaking, not in terms of the discussion. Okay, So first of all, this movie tells its story with flashbacks and also with characters' interpretations of things. Like, for instance, after this secret is out, the next morning, Zendaya wakes up and Robert Pattinson's not there. And we cut to a scene where he's with his best friend, and his best friend is telling him, dude, you got to just run. Just break up with her, cancel the wedding, get back in the plane, go back to England, I'll take care of it. Don't even tell her where you're going, you know. And the film is shot to look like a, the rest of the movie. You think that's what's happening. But then Robert Pattinson comes in with 2 coffees, and we see that, no, that's just what was happening in her mind. And it does this at a couple different times. And does it fairly well. The problem is that sometimes it doesn't. It goes to one of these flashbacks or one of these interpretations or something, and when it cuts back to the real film or the real timeline, you're not sure if you're back in the real timeline. There's nothing distinguishing the flashbacks, the jump forwards, the flashbacks, flash forwards, flash sideways. There's nothing distinguishing them from the regular timeline, and that's by design. The film doesn't want you to have that break, because it's trying to show you how that narrative is now being integrated into their real lives. So it doesn't have any, it's like the color filter is not off, there's not a weird angle, there's nothing, again, no sound effect, there's none of that lost whoosh kind of thing to distinguish it. And that's fine in theory, but here's the problem, and maybe other people didn't have this issue, but when it happens and I have to disengage from the narrative mentally to ask myself, wait, is this real, or is this another flashback, flash forward, flash sideways, time jump, it disengages me from the film. This film that has worked very hard to keep my attention and to keep me engaged in it. So even if, and anybody who works in movies or stage will tell you that there is a disconnect between the passage of time on screen and the passage of time in an audience member's head. What feels like it's taking so long to do on stage actually kind of speeds up a little bit when you are, when the audience sees it. And the same thing here. When I have to disengage from the film in order to process, wait, what's happening? That's not good, especially when the film is dealing with topics and situations that are uncomfortable that you naturally don't want to re-engage with. So by doing it like that, they cost themselves some of the audience engagement. Likewise, this is the one that really got me, and this happened, I remember, the closest film I can kind of compare this one to is the one I watched last year, After the Hunt, which did this almost this exact same thing, and that's annoying sound cues. This film and this director can't quite seem to disengage from the indie film school of movie making. Like, for instance, there's a lot of weird shots of close-ups of flowers for reasons. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but what's really annoying is it uses what I call the indie sound cue. And that is, they do this a lot in indie movies. You don't see it a lot in mainstream, but where the action is silent except for one guy blowing on an oboe or something going doo, 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 doo. Oh my God, it's fucking irritating. I hate that. And again, I understand why the filmmaker, why the director chose to do that, because it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. You know, when things are getting more tense, the dudes get a little closer, you know, dude. So it's supposed to be, you know, an audio cue that things are uncomfortable and you should be on edge and you, the audience, should be as tense as they are. But again, for me at least, it's so fucking distracting. Every time it happens, I just want to be like, shut up! You know, stop that! I'm engaged. I'm tense. You don't need the fucking oboe music to, you know, to make this work. Okay? Yeah, it bugs me. Bugs the hell out of me, because again, it does the same thing. It causes me to disengage. And with a film like this, when you disengage, it takes a while to get back into it because you don't want to. You don't want to. Your mind doesn't want to be introduced to these uncomfortable situations. So yeah, the thing I have to say is that this is an interesting film. I think there are two lessons to be learned here. I'm being kind of facetious on this, so, you know, I gotta lighten the mood a little. Number one is that if you're ever in a situation where someone says, hey, let's play a game about, you know, what's the worst thing you ever did, or what's something you don't like about me. If your partner ever says that, let's have better communication. Tell me, what's something you don't like about me. It's a trap. Don't fucking do it. Don't fucking play it. Say, nope, not doing that, and that's all. Don't even, because it never ends well. Ever.
Just tell me one thing that bothers you, and I promise I won't get mad.
Sometimes you're too beautiful.
Howie, be serious.
Okay. I really don't like how your wings poke me when we sleep, because you're an angel.
And secondly, again, this is a joke, trying to lighten the mood here. Know when to lie. What's the worst thing you ever did? Oh, I stole a kid's Halloween candy. Come on. That's something, I would not have blamed her if she kept it to herself. Again, joke, don't get pissy. It's just trying to lighten the mood from a very heavy conversation. So we're at the end here, and I now again have to ask the question, how do I feel about this movie? And I don't know. I think it's a good movie. I think it's a well-made movie. It's definitely a movie I would recommend, kind of like, this is my cheap out. I don't know if it's helpful, but I do think this is one I would definitely put under the heading of go see it for yourself and you make the judgment call. I think it's one that is very dependent on the person viewing its interpretation. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful to anybody or not.
What did you think of Samson and Delilah, boys?
Overblown and underwritten, sir.
I liked it. Thanks, boys. You've been of absolutely no help.
So on the one hand, this is a well-made, well-acted, well-written film that tackles a complicated subject and does it really, really well. On the other hand, there are filmmaking aspects of it that are disengaging and bothersome, and the general topic itself is unpleasant. But you've got to tackle unpleasant topics. You've got to offend somebody at some point. So where do I come down? I think it's a good movie, but I don't think it's a movie I'll ever feel the need to watch again. I think that's the best way I can put it. Final grade, which is harder, I must begrudgingly, and I say begrudgingly because, again, there's so much negative that this film is about, but that's the point. I have to give it an A. I think the problems with it the filmmaking problems don't distract completely from what the film is trying to do. And on the other side of the ledger, the movie itself, the subject matter and whatnot that it brings up, that is important. It is something to talk about. It is something to, that you should think about, even though you might not want to. So I don't mark it off for that. But again, I say this is one you definitely have to see and make the judgment for yourself. So sorry for not being too helpful, but that's the best I can say. Okay, that was a heavy episode. I was not expecting it to get this heavy, but boy howdy, did it. I need to go watch a Disney movie to to cleanse myself a little bit. So anyway, so thank you for listening to my ramblings. Thank you for coming along. And I hope you're doing well. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.